Hello and welcome back to my series on demystifying the spelling rules and alternative pronunciations which make the later stages of phonic development such a challenge to teach and learn. If you're tearing your hair out looking for simple ways to explain which representation of the E sound or phoneme to use in words like sheep, clean, these or very, then this video is for you. By the end of this film, you'll know how to explain when each E sound or phoneme is used so that you can teach the E family spectacularly well. One of the most common ways of spelling the E sound or phoneme uses an E, and this is most often found in the middle of words. This frequently used representation of E is usually taught in reception class. You'll recognise this E sound or phoneme in words like sheep, keep, feet, or even longer words like steep, sleep, or street. The next most obvious E alternative is the split digraph E. Like other split digraphs, the E sound is made by splitting the E's with a new letter squeezed in the middle. This split digraph E can be found in words like these, complete, athlete, or extreme. There aren't many common words with this split E digraph, unlike the split A digraph where there are ever so many. Another really common way to spell the E sound or phoneme is with an E and an A making the E sound. When to use this method of spelling E rather than with an E and an E is by far the hardest to explain. Sometimes this just depends on the word's meaning, like meet when you meet a friend, or meat, the kind of meat that you eat, or see when you look at something, and see as in the ocean. These are called homophones. Try to avoid these homophones at the early stages of teaching this tricky rule. Remember, homophones are where there are two different spellings for two different word meanings, but the words sound exactly the same. One really helpful rule to help us to remember when to use an EE rather than an EA to make the E sound or phoneme is that an EA is most often used when we hear the E at the beginning of words or in the middle of words which end with a ch or a Words like each, eat, east, Easter, beach, teach, cream, or stream are all really good examples of this rule. One of the easiest alternative ways of spelling the E sound or phoneme is using a Y at the end of words. This is really common and is easier than you'd think for the children to remember. By this stage, the children will remember that a Y at the beginning of words makes a Y sound, like in yes, yet, or yell. When there is a Y at the end of words, it usually creates an E sound or phoneme. We can usually find this in words like hairy, very, dusty, crunchy, bumpy, or silly. Exceptions to avoid at the stage of introducing this rule include words like be, three, free, see, or tea. These are important words for reading or spelling because they're common words, but it's important not to overwhelm the children at this stage. As we can see, there are so many versions of spelling the E sound or phoneme, and it's easy for the children to be confused by introducing too many alternatives too quickly. E at the end of words is not just represented by a Y on its own. It can also be spelt with an E and a Y. This is much rarer than words with a Y ending making the E sound, and it's used most often when the E at the end of words follows a K making a K sound. You'll see this rule in words like key, donkey, turkey, or jockey. Words to avoid at this stage should include words like lucky, sticky, or picky. These sound like there is a K before the E sound, but an EY isn't needed here because the K sound is represented by a C and a K and not a K. Another E rule for the children to master is when the letter E represents its letter sound or phoneme in words, and when it should be pronounced by its letter name E. The children will need to have a basic understanding of syllables as beats in a word as a basis for understanding this rule. As a general rule of thumb, E is pronounced by its letter sound when it is at the beginning or in the middle of words like egg, elf, elephant, bed, red, or check. But when E is at the end of one-syllable words, it usually is pronounced by its letter name. So, for example, he, we, she, me, or be. E has a different representation in the middle of words ending with an F or VE. In these words, the E sound or phoneme usually has more than one consonant before the E sound or phoneme. And in these words, the E sound is represented by an I and an E. You'll recognise this rule in words like chief, thief, belief, achieve, believe, or relieve. Exceptions to steer clear of at this stage include words like reef, or beef, or weave, or peace, because these just disprove the rule. So there you have it, a collection of spelling rules to teach the alternative ways of representing the E sound or phoneme in words, to help children to learn to read and spell with even more success at this tricky stage of phonic development. Here's a quick recap. An E and an E makes the E sound or phoneme, and it's common, and we often find it in the middle of words. The E split digraph is much rarer and also makes the E sound in the same way. It just has a letter squeezed in the middle of the E's. An EA making the E sound or phoneme is much harder to distinguish from an E and an E. This often depends on word meaning, but a simple rule which can help is that an E and an A mostly make the E sound at the beginning of words or in the middle of words ending with a ch or a m. Words ending with an E sound or phoneme often use a Y to make the E sound, and if there's a K or a K before the E, an EY can also be used. E makes its letter name rather than its letter sound at the end of one-syllable words, and I and an E makes an E sound or phoneme in the middle of words ending in F or VE. Comment below and let me know how you got on. I'd love to hear from you. It's a great idea to train children to be phoneme or sound detectives by looking out for these spelling alternatives everywhere you go. They can be found in reading books, packaging, almost anywhere. Challenge the children to explain why particular spellings have been used in the words that they spot, or if these are exception words. This kind of reasoning really helps with long-term memory of these exceptionally tricky rules. If you found this video helpful, I've got a freebie that I think will be really useful for you too. It's a PDF guide of all of the alternative spellings and pronunciations that you'll need to be able to teach Phase 5 spectacularly well. It's linked in the description below. I've also included a link to some free slides that I use to make the alternative spellings and pronunciations really obvious to the children. I use these as slides, but I also use them as visual prompts to remind the children of the rules we've been learning throughout the day. I find these really helpful and the children really engage with them. And if you're working with children with any kinds of phonic gaps and you're looking for some inspiration for how to spot and address the phonic gaps for rapid results, then check out these videos. They give you some really simple games that you can play to support children without having to spend hours on planning and resourcing. If this video has been useful, don't forget to give it a quick thumbs up and subscribe to my channel and click the bell to be notified for new phonics and early reading videos every single Thursday. And we'd love you to come and join our Letters and Sounds Facebook community, where we're a group of teachers and teaching assistants from all over the world sharing top tips and ideas for phonics every single day. See See you soon!